In today's video, we're going to be going over Sung Jin Woo's Shadow Army. And I'm going to start it off with the ranks of the Shadow Army. So I have it written down here, but the normal grade is C rank. That's like, the rank of the hunters. It goes from D all the way to S. And it goes from basically from D to A and then to S and then to national ranked hunters. But for the shadows, it's a little bit different. So the normal grade shadows are the C rank. Those are like the ones that probably the ones in the beginning of the story, like the knights that we saw when Sung Jin Woo went ahead and killed Igris at the end of the dungeon. But those were the first ones, and those were the first ones that awakened this power of the system. And we have the elite grade. The elite grade are the most common of the Sung Jin Woo's shadows. There's probably like the orcs, the all the other miscellaneous things that he picked up, the bears that he picked up from the Frost Dungeon, the orcs from the time that he was saving his sister, the end of the knights from last time, and then probably the demons from the demon arcs. And then we also have the night grade. Night grade is A rank, and that's when the shadows can start to be named. I think most of the early on shadows like Igris, Tank, Iron, they started off as night grade, but then they evolved later on in the story. And then we have Elite Knight, so that's when we start getting into the really powerful shadows. This is like the weaker kind of side of S rank, but they can hold their own with an S rank hunter, but they probably couldn't be able to beat most of the S rank hunters. The general grade hunter is like an S rank or higher, so they could beat most of the S ranks, and they could even evolve past an S rank. And then we have the Marshal. The Marshal is the highest grade that can evolve into the stronger members. And most of the noteworthy shadows are this grade, like Igris and Biru. And these are really the really strong ones, the ones that could probably even go against national ranked hunters. It's very, there's not a lot of details to say if they can go against national ranked hunters, because I don't think they could, go toe to toe with Thomas Andre, because even Sung Jin Woo had a little bit of a problem with him. But I do think that if Biru, maybe not Igris, but maybe Biru could go toe to toe with Thomas Andre. I'm not exactly sure, but they didn't really give us too much of an explanation on their power level. And then Grand Marshal is, of course, there's only one Grand Marshal. The Grand Marshal is literally, there's no other being compared to Grand Marshal Shadow, and we're talking about Belian, of course, because there can only be one Shadow Grand Marshal, and that's usually whoever is the Grand Marshal is the one that leads the Shadow Army. And there's not a lot of people that could go toe to toe with Belian. I don't even think Thomas Andre could touch Belian. The only one that's really stronger than Belian is Sung Jin Woo. Okay, so now let's get into the actual shadows. So as we've been talking about, go ahead and check out the other shadows in the playlist. But the first one we're going to talk about is Igris, and of course he is the Marshal grade level. Igris is, one of the top commanders of the Shadow Army, and he's the one that guards the king's back, which is Sung Jin Woo, which is a very, very pivotal position for him to be at, just because he trusts Igris so much that he can guard him with his back. And as we all know, Igris was one of like the first ever named shadows in the solo leveling history, and he was the one that that Sung Jin Woo eventually beat in one of his like early solo dungeons, and he named him Igris because he didn't really like the blood red commander Igris. He was like, yeah, that's too cringy, let me change this to Igris. And then we see him throughout the story. He goes ahead and kills Tank, Kim Chill, and the Frost dungeon with the Frost elves. And we just see him throughout the story just whooping ass, taking no receipts. He's just a crazy looking knight that has like a red like ponytail, and he also got the lightning sword from Sung Jin Woo that he got later on from the Demon King. So then we also get Tank later on in the series. Tank is the one that died to Igris, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. He died to Igris, and he was a knight. He was a knight level. So knight level is only A rank, and he was one of the bear leaders in the Red Gate incident, and that's the little Frost dungeon that I'm talking about with the Frost elves. and Sung Jin-woo eventually revived him because he was like, this is a really strong bear, and I kind of need a little bit more of a shadow army to go against the Frost Elves, which the Frost Elves were almost on the same level as Sung Jin-woo at that time. So he started to build out his army, and Tank was one of the first ones that he starts to build out. And then we have Iron, which guess who killed him? Ygritte killed Iron again. So Iron was one of the first human shadows that Sung Jin-woo ever risen, and he was the guy that was the leader of the Red Gate incident. So the Red Gate incident is basically where there was a random gate and then it turned red, and then everybody that went into it got locked into it. And Sung Jin-woo was the one in there, and then there was like a group of A-Rinks that were in there, and Iron was named Kim Chul, and that was his basically persona. He was like this tank. He was like this very egotistical tank of the party. And then once they went in there, they found out there was Frost Elves in there, and Frost Elves were like, I think they were like S rank at the time. Or no, they quickly dispatched most of the A rank hunters, but then Sung Jin-woo came in time and saved them. But then Kim Chul kind of grew worried. He didn't really trust Sung Jin-woo. He was like, why is this guy like on the same level as the Frost Elves? And I don't really trust him. So he basically tried to stab him in his back. And who's watching Sung Jin-woo's back? Ygritte, of course. And Ygritte just beheaded him. And Sung Jin-woo was like, you know what? I need some more people to go against the Frost Elves. So he went ahead and revived Tank, and that's where Tank started off. And as we see him throughout the story, he's literally his name. He's the Tank. He can aggro people to him, and he can take massive amounts of damage and just, basically tank for the Shadow Army. Tusk was an Orc Mage. Tusk was an elite knight, so he was around S rank power as well. Tusk was he was an Orc Mage, and he was one of the Red Orcs in one of the dungeons. And I think he was the clan leader of all the Red Orcs that spawned in Sung Jin-woo's sister's high school. So Sung Jin-woo was really mad at that time because he was like, yeah, I'm not flying with this. My sister almost died. There's a bunch of Red Orcs in this high school. I'm about to go crazy. And he really did. I don't even think he put out any of his shadows to go against all these orcs. He literally, he was a one-man army. He single-handedly killed all of them. And then he went against the clan leader, which was like a Red Orc Mage, which had a lot of abilities. If you guys want to look it up, he had so many abilities. Like he could do like Dragon's Breath. He could do like a Hymn of Protection. He could do a lot of these things. So the fight was pretty cool. Sung Jin-woo then eventually in the end killed him just because he was like, yeah, you guys are not surviving after you guys just threatened my little sister. So he just destroyed that whole Orc clan with no remorse. And he later on revived him, and he named him Tusk because he had, he's an Orc, yes, crazy red tusk. And he later on gave him the Orb of Avarice, which basically doubles his attack power on all of his spells and makes them even bigger and just way more powerful than they used to be. So Tusk is pretty OP. He's an elite knight. He's an S rank level shadow, but he's pretty OP compared to like everything else in the army. And we see him, destroying demons in the demon arc when they were in hell. He was just destroying the demons, like they couldn't even touch him. And then throughout the series, he's just there to support with like spells and everything, and he's just a really good support. And then we have Kaizel. So if you guys don't know what Kaizel is, he was a wyvern, and he was a knight level. He wasn't really there for fighting. Kaizel was there for transportation. You guys might be wondering, wait, Sung Jin-woo needs transportation? Can he just teleport to his shadows? He did, but there's a cooldown on it, and I think the cooldown on the teleportation was like 12 or 24 hours, something like that. So whenever he couldn't, just transport to a shadow that he had planted around the world, he would just ride Kaizel to get there as fast as he could. And Kaizel was the wyvern of the Demon King, if you guys didn't know, of Demon King Baron. And when Sung Jin-woo defeated Baron, I still think that's one of the best fights in solo leveling, but he destroyed Demon King Baron, and once he did that, he took his he basically said arise on Kaizel, and he became his personal vehicle for the rest of the series. And then we have Beru, which we all know who Beru was. He was the Ant King in the Jeju Island raid. And I think the Jeju Island raid was one of the best arcs in the solo leveling. And so we all know that he was destroying all the Japanese and Korean hunters at the time. And then Sung Jin Woo was like, "Yeah, I don't know. You need to stop your role. I'm not gonna let you kill my, potential crush." And then he just teleported there because he had a shadow on Chai Hain. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he had a shadow on Chai Hain, and he went ahead and just destroyed Beru. They were going toe to toe at first, but then after Sung Jin Woo turned it up a notch, and Beru was just outclassed, outmanned, outgunned. He couldn't do anything, and he just destroyed Beru. And then he later on arrested him, and he became one of the most loyal soldiers in the Shadow Army. And then we saw him, time and time again going against all the monarchs, and he was probably one of the most powerful, except when Belial came along. And then we have Jima. We don't really see much of Jima, but Jima was one of the bosses of the Nagas. I don't really remember where the Nagas came from, but it was some solo dungeon that Sung Jin Woo did, and he went ahead and basically converted a lot of the Nagas into his Shadow Army, and Jima was the only named Naga, and he was around a elite knight, so he was a S rank hunter level, and we don't really know much about Jima. He's just a really huge Naga. He was like a giant. And then we also had Kamish. As we know, Kamish was one of the strongest dragons that ever existed, and he literally destroyed the entire west coast of America. So off alone, just him not even being a shadow was crazy. But when Sung Jin Woo went to America, he found out the remains of Kamish, and he tried to go ahead and arise him. And then after that, it didn't really work out. He had to do 2 tries, and you only get 3 tries when you're trying to arise a dead warrior or somebody. And he almost failed on the second attempt, but he eventually got Kamish to come back out. And he learned a lot from Kamish, that there's ruler vessels on Earth, and that you should watch out for them, and that he would have loved to serve in the Shadow Army, but Kamish was dead for a long time. I think it was like 20 years at that point, so he couldn't really be a shadow at that point. It was way too long for the shadow to keep on going, so Kamish just faded out into existence. And then we have Greed, and as we know from the previous video that I did, Greed was Hwang Dong-so, which was Sung Jin Woo's rival. So Sung Jin Woo killed Hwang Dong-so's brother. Then Hwang Dong-so tried to get revenge on him, but Sung Jin Woo was not liking that, so he literally destroyed the most powerful clan in America just to go ahead and get Hwang Dong-so, and he killed him in front of Thomas Andre, and Thomas Andre couldn't do nothing about it because Sung Jin Woo just destroyed him in the previous battle. And Greed was, he was a general grade, so he wasn't really strong, but he was stronger than most of the S-rank hunters. And then we have Belial. Belial was the Grand Marshal and Grand Marshal means that, there's nobody else that could reach your strength in the Shadow Army. And he was the commander of the whole Shadow Army even before Sung Jin Woo existed. So he was the leader of the Shadow Army for almost eons. So he knew a lot of the ways to, basically go ahead about the Shadow Army and command them, and there's nobody that could really reach his strength. Even Beru was not stronger than him. There's kind of a middle ground. We don't really know if Belial is stronger than Thomas Andre or if he's stronger than the Monarchs. It's really hard to gauge that, but I do think that he's one of the most powerful beings in solo leveling. And then we also have some giants. So the giants were from the Tokyo gate that just popped out in the middle of the sky. And then all these giants came out of it, and they were just destroying Tokyo. And then Sung Jin Woo teleported there with Thomas Andre, and they went ahead and handled it. And that's where he found out the giant monarch. Then he went ahead and took them to Shadow Army. And they're basically the strongest infantry that Sung Jin Woo has, and they were all more powerful than S rank hunters, and I think he had 28 or 29 of them. So there's a lot of a lot of giants in his Shadow Army, and they really helped him out in like the Monarch Wars against like the Frost Army, the Insect Army, and the Beast Army. So that's really all we know about the giants. You know, the shadows, they all came from Sung Jin Woo's shadow. So the whole point of him having a shadow army was because the system wanted to grant him power, and this system was basically using him as a reincarnation for the Shadow Monarch. But Ashbourne was like, you know what? Go ahead and let Sung Jin Woo use my powers. I don't really care. I don't want to be reincarnated again. I think he'll do a better job at protecting the Earth, basically. The Shadow Army was his like leverage to basically go ahead and solo all these dungeons, for him to level up, for him to battle against all these crazy monarchs with their armies. That was the only reason that Sung Jin Woo was able to go ahead and do all these crazy feats, is because he had a army supporting him. So that's really all we know about the Shadow Army. If you guys liked it, go ahead and give me a like and leave in the comment section below if there's any shadow that I missed. I don't think I missed anything. I've covered all the named shadows and the giants. I mean, sure, there's like the knights and the nagas, but there's not really much to their story. They just got risen into the Shadow Army. Yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Go.